Hey, what's up guys, Cod Dog here, and today I want to be touching base on a video I made a while back. It was a mindset on how to play solo rust. I kind of want to rephrase some of the things I said in that video, and it was pretty abrasive what I said back then. If you haven't checked it out, I mean, you can if you want. It was basically a depressing tone on how rust solo is really hard, and being able to be successful in wipes is very tricky, especially when you're not super experienced or super good at the game. So I want to kind of rephrase some things, and I want to trace out what a good successful plan would be in a more conceptual fashion.
This is Aztec Pirate. You don't know what this is, do you?
So the first step I would recommend is to understand and take inventory of your inventory. What I mean by that is the items in your inventory obviously of importance. You rate it from low to high. A rock and your torch are obviously at the lowest. You have stone, you got sulfur, whatever. This is a very obvious thing to say to anyone out there, that valuing a higher tier item is super important. But a lot of successful solo players are not only better at PvP, but also smarter at how they play. They're not going to be running through the middle of a town without any firepower with stuff in their inventory. They know when to go out and figure out how they're going to maneuver a monument, or how they're going to tackle an objective, or how they're going to recycle, maybe at night, maybe with night vision goggles, maybe with a flashlight, or you know, whatever. The point is that these solo players who are very good at being successful on these servers are maneuvering around certain situations. A good example is you hear explosions in your neighborhood or whatever, and you want to go counter it. You want to go see if you can take some loot out of the chest once they're done. You want to help out your neighbors. You want to help out the raiders, whatever. You have to understand that you are at risk of losing everything, and being able to understand what you want to lose, if it's nothing, if it's everything, it's your call. Now this is, again, it's a very obvious thing to state, but a lot of players are not successful because they do not deposit enough. They lose too much because they think they need to keep gathering and gathering and gathering, when sometimes they shouldn't. Another good example is when you're at a town and you see something valuable. Say you have 175 scrap. Now that's a significant amount, and would you go back to base for it? How far away is your base? You know, a lot of these factors have to measure in at what kind of actions should you take. Now, we did mention PvP in step 1, but I want to break that down a little bit more. Now, obviously, there's millions and millions of videos on how to measure your recoil pattern, your spray control, what gun is the most efficient. We have a video on that. Let's put it up in the top right corner right now. Boom. Okay, it should be there. Maybe not. I might be lazy. PvP is super valuable for a solo player because obviously you're gathering less than everyone else if they're in groups. Or if you're in a duo stack and you're playing up against a 4 stack, you're still going to be gathering way less than the opponent. So how do you alleviate that? Well, obviously the best way to jumpstart it is by killing a farmer or killing anyone that's got any gear that you clearly don't have. And there's not a whole lot of explaining I can do before you actually just have to practice for a bit. But a large part of the fights I win are because of how advantageous I am with positioning. Positioning is super big in Rust because the kill time is very quick, especially out in the open. I think a lot of people undervalue how fast you can die in the game, and catching someone off guard is super important. Now, I'm not saying go sit in the corner at gas station and wait for someone to recycle, even though it is a valuable strat, but don't take fights you can't win. And simply put, if you hear a bunch of gunshots and you just have a crossbow, don't take the fight. If you see multiple people, maybe 4 or 5, maybe a whole Zerg running through a valley, just stay in your base. Don't run away. Don't run outside. Don't go and attempt to get resources at that time. A lot of successful solo players are just living off of what they can gather at the time. And like I said at point 1, making sure that you don't lose your valuables from whatever you're gathering, whether it be resources or scrap or other parts or whatever. You have to make sure that you can survive and get back home to deposit it, keep your growth going on your base. So not exactly understanding a spray control or understanding what gun is the best gun, but understanding more of conceptually why you would want to take a fight versus not.
You don't know what this is, do you?
I know I've been very abstract so far with these tips, but I promise you this one is not that broad. Understanding wipe times is very important for maneuvering around the map early game. I think the longer time you have where you're not being gunned down by an AK or an M60 or whatever is super important to the player. Obviously, being in more equal bow fights is probably where you're going to be at your best. In early game tier 2 fighting, you're probably going to be your apex. per se. Being better than the opponent is one thing, but when you're able to grub around and get a bunch of early kickstarted gear, it really sets you up, because being a solo player, nothing is more frustrating than not having anything and then respawning and also not having anything again. So making sure you know the wipe time and the wipe schedule is super important and super vital if you want to have a super successful wipe. I want to say here for tip number 4 is make some friends. Now obviously if this is a solo video, how are you supposed to make friends? This is meant for the one players. But what I'm saying is that if you have this good start and you have these resources piled up, if you got some lucky break, so you know that happens sometimes. Sometimes you just find a dead body with a gun on it. It's just your break. Sometimes it doesn't. But what I'm trying to say is that if you have these excessive resources and you've done your researching, or you've gotten too much of a certain resource, handing it out or giving it to somebody that's, especially like a neighbor or someone that said that they could help you later on, is super vital. I've met a lot of friends on Rust through the solo grind set. For the most part, they've come to fruition, and I'm still on a Snapchat group chat with a couple of them. Shout out to Saxon and the boys. What I'm trying to say is that make some friends, okay? That's the simplest point. Make some damn friends, okay? Would it hurt you? You're a solo player. You want to kill yourself already. For tip number 5, this is the final one. I know I've been pretty broad with my strokes, as I said earlier, but here's a couple tangible things I can tell you. Make sure you know how to maneuver around the monuments. Make sure you know what kind of guns you want to use. Make sure you know how to handle using those guns. Make sure to avoid counter raids. As I have been debated so many times by going into those gunshots and explosions just to die. Now obviously you can go ahead and watch them and go in after if you want. Like who the hell cares? It's your gaming experience. Do whatever the hell you want. But what I'm trying to say, don't always go for those raids. Instead, go for something a lot more valuable for a solo player. It's hover around monuments. Do not hover around big bases that are going to get raided, or a bunch of bases, because as much as it's hard for a solo player to raid, I would argue it's even harder to have a solo player counter raid, because they normally will have more than just one person raiding a base, so they're going to have someone watching their back. And even if you kill one, the other one's on comms telling him where you are. And it's a lot of monkey business is what I'm saying. And a lot less often, you'd be surprised, people will be soloing the monuments. I had me and a buddy, we would spawn on other sides of the map. I'm like, hey man, you want a TP? I get it, we're on a modded server, it's what it is. I'm like, hey buddy, you want a TP? I'm like, no, let's just both get resources and then we'll meet up later. And this is where they would kill us, is where we're not together. And I want to preface this by saying, not every time are you gonna find a solo guy with 7C4 in a monument, but it's a bigger, steady amount of income coming to you at all times. So make sure to know where the recycling bins are at the monuments. Make sure to hit up the counter raids every once in a while, not all the time, please. And make sure, above all else, to subscribe. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and I will see you guys later. Peace.
Swing a spade, rhyme craze. I move strategic lyrics blaze whenever heated on point. Inflaming MCs like joints, a man of actual reactions like I'm packing. State of mind's position like a prison, my soul's attacking. Using the streets as the planes of battle. I'm rounding hostages like cattle. I sneak attacking from the shadows to leave you rattled by my militant ways. My murdering phase, assassinating traitors out of habit. My mind is tragic, still in training for this time of reigning. I'm talking terrorists, so fuck this waste of time explaining. So I'll attack you.